Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Okay, all you citizens of the world, it is time for another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. And this one, for the week of the 21st of February in the year 2025, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to pull together our entire crew. That includes hosts, engineers, former hosts, producers. And I'm really kind of happy that we're going to do this. Usually I've got some guest and we do a couple different segments, but we're just going to all hang out here together, talk a little bit about what's going on in the world, try to focus on what's going on closer to home, hear a little bit of music, and we'll have a good time. So I want to tell everybody that stay tuned for the next close to an hour. You're going to have not only me, Michael James, as your host, but my cohorts, Thom Clark, Lynn Orman, and Katy Hogan, and especially our engineer, Hal James, who just happens to turn 34 today, and we're talking 2 days before this show goes up. So happy birthday, Hal. Happy birthday, and we'll all probably sing it at the end again. I want to say a couple of good things. We are a media outlet, so to speak, and I got this. It's Jim Acosta, former CNN anchor, saying news organizations in Washington should be banding together to send a message that members of the press will determine how they cover the news, not the White House. Trump may respond by inviting only sycophants and right-wing hacks to chronicle his daily decrees. Fine. Let the American people soak that in, the image of an aspiring autocrat and his servile propagandist. And I got that from Substack, which is something that's new to me. I also am been getting a lot of things in the mail from a guy named Midas, and it's the Midas Touch podcast. And I just wanted to share that the news out of Newsweek is that Joe Rogan is no longer number one in the podcast world. But this new guy, I'm not sure of his whole name, he's kind of a wise ass challenging Trump all the time. So I recommend you all check out the Midas Touch podcast. Some among us don't really want to talk about the orange-faced guy, but I'm going to share a couple of quick things before we move on. I want to say that our past president, the last one, did good. Well, this guy is pretty cruel and evil. Divides our nation. He terrifies the majority now, I hope, because we got to do something. We're not suffering from an invasion. We are the bad guys, or the U.S. is right now in the world. Trump pardoned people who beat the cops. We are in the early grips of fascism, I would say. Will the people wake up? All this is a test, a challenge to young and old to get off our butts and make a difference. If you voted for Trump or you didn't vote at all, you basically did vote for Trump. And we're going to have to defeat them in the next election. We should have elected someone who protected democracy rather than worrying about the price of eggs, because they are going to continue to go up. And I am wondering what happens to people who get separated from stability and become truly desperate. So with all that said, I'm going to turn it over to the group.
I'll go first, Michael. It's pronounced sycophant, and you might as well learn how to say it, because it'll be, useful for the next few years. So sycophant.
Sycophant.
Yeah. And how do you spell Midas?
M-E-I-D-A-S.
Yeah.
It's the Midas Touch podcast.
I know. I'm familiar with it. I wanted you to spell it for anybody who would be looking up M-I-D-A-S.
As usual, Katy Hogan, I appreciate everything you encourage me to do. Talk a little bit about a nation divided at this time and what's going on. Your take on it.
Okay. So I'm sorry, Tom, but I have to talk about the people who are causing all the pain right now. I don't have to say their names. Everybody knows them. But every time you hear someone use the word mandate or overwhelming, bunch of votes, we all have to remind folks of the actual results of this election. When we go door knocking, we usually jokingly, of course, come back with saying not home is winning. Okay, because we mark off on our little sheets, whether we canvassed or they were not home or they moved or whatever, but not home is winning. So not voted won the election in November. Not voted had the highest percentage of votes cast. Next was the guy who's sitting at 1,600 with, did somebody say the exact result?
49.7, I thought it was.
I'm just glad that I did everything I could because I knew the guy had a chance of winning, and I didn't want to feel like I could have done anything more the day after he won. And I succeeded in doing everything I possibly could. So I didn't feel bad about not. That having been said, I had no concept, even after seeing him do this the first time between 2016 and 2020. I had no idea the addition the muskrat would provide him and all his minions running around with their heads chopped off. I'm really glad, Michael, that you and Paige and I and Tom's wife, Jean, and others were in the Federal Plaza as quickly as we could be to send a message. I'm also really glad that people are breaking the switchboard in DC with their phone calls. And, we had, I don't know if it was AOC who first came out with it or someone else, but it was basically the rundown, the comparison on the switchboard is 40 calls a minute for the entire Senate to 1,400 calls a minute. Wow. So when people like Chris Murphy from your old state, Michael, Connecticut, who's been doing a fine job of keeping people's feet to the fire and staying public with it, when he says stuff like, send me some money so I can keep doing this and not make money calls all day long, Americans should understand what their Congress people do is call donors. A huge percentage of the time. What percentage would you guess, Thom Clark?
60%.
Yeah. So if they are spending all that time calling people to give them money so that they can run for office again in 2 years or less than, because it's only a 2-year stint, how much time do they have to learn their jobs and do their jobs particularly? So it is a good time to give the people who are doing things, $5 a month kind of thing. That's a really great thing for them to know that they're going to get $5 a month from however many of their constituents or supporters who aren't their constituents. We should be doing that for Jan Schakowsky, who has showed up. She has been there in front of whatever buildings she needed to be in front of in DC when the Doge folks decided to do their ransacking of yet another government office. But we're in serious straits. We're in real serious straits. And the fact that even on a day that it was 0 degrees outside, people still showed up to protest the presence of these people in our lives. Not the guy who was elected, but the unelected folks and what they're doing and how they're breaking the law every single day.
Important for people, now that we've rested, to still listen, discern, collaborate, and to the extent we are able, make good trouble. That might be a demonstration sometimes. I'd like them to be a little more focused. I think that the national boycott being organized from the grassroots on February 28th, do not buy from any national chains. Certainly do not use Amazon. Buy local if you need essentials, but basically don't buy anything. Shut the economy down in terms of national change and stuff on February 28th. Things like that, I think, along with phone calls. I mean, Congress people track things like that. They track handwritten letters. Are they reading everyone? They don't have time to. They have to raise money, but they have staff who are reading them. And if there's a stack like this compared to a stack like that, people pay attention. If your phone switchboard is tied up because of the inundation of phone calls, you're going to pay attention to that. So each of us needs to do what we can do to resist what we knew was coming. And they told us they are better organized this time than they were the last time. And I'm just reflecting on what did I do 8 years ago? I refocused on local. What are the results? A revived Network 49, a new alderwoman. We continue to stop charter schools from invading our public schools. The list goes on. We have life safety rings on the lakefront. Focused on local, where we have some control and influence and can change things, is not a bad place to start right now. Because I can't control Rubio opening up prison camps in Panama. They're fencing in kids again down there. That's today's horrific story.
In Panama?
In Panama. They were bust in there over the weekend. They have kids and families behind fences again in jungle conditions. Such a Christian humanitarian regime.
I was going to talk about Target, but since you mentioned Christians, and I know that Thom and Katy are both Catholic, the Pope is in the hospital, and I'm not sure if it looks good. Could I ask one or both of you to say a few words about this Pope and the situation? And he has been outspoken about the Trump policies.
We're praying for him. He's an old guy like the rest of us on this screen, and he has double pneumonia right now. So we're praying for him.
Yeah, I wouldn't think it's particularly good for him to have what he has in both lungs. He's been a really good voice for progressives in the church. He's been protective of people. He's done what popes should do for the most part. The funny thing is about right now, when you're being told by gangsters that they are going after corruption and waste, and you know that they're not. If they were going after corruption and waste, they would have turned and looked at the Pentagon, where we spend 47 cents of every dollar of our budget. I'm sorry, the people that paid for whatever 1,000 condoms in whatever nation, $32,000 here and $50,000 there, ain't where the waste is, boys. It's just not. But when you look at this, and for those of us who have been political forever, we always knew the government was wasting money, right? We also always knew, even when we elected someone we wanted, that once they were in the system, they well may be finding themselves doing a little, sleight of hand here, sleight of hand, a little quid pro quo for these guys and those, doing things that we criticize the Republicans for. They've been doing. And, when Trump comes in and he's, okay, I'm going to open up all the secrets about, say, President Kennedy's assassination. Oh, my goodness. How surprised are we that it was a flipping conspiracy to the highest levels of our own government? Not surprised, but not bad that he exposed it. Okay. So there are points where I could say to some reasonable MAGA sitting across from me, oh, yeah, please go after the waste. Please. It'd be great for us to stop wasting money. Let me know when you find it. Or the other thing of, yeah, we kind of figured out that it was a conspiracy that killed not only Kennedy, but Martin and Robert. And, we have the entire playbook here in Chicago for the murder of Fred Hampton. So it's an interesting moment for us to look at how truthful, how confident are we that our government tells us the truth at any time. Okay. And, they've been practicing keeping things controlled and seriously sent out drip by drip or not at all, in contrast with this guy who will say anything. He's not doing that quite as much because of lack of Twitter for him, I guess. But but he'll still say anything and he'll still do anything. I mean, the fact that they just had a meeting in Europe about the Ukraine with no one from Ukraine at the table, I'm going to pay attention to that and see what kind of a change it makes in geopolitical movements in general. We have Russia, we have Saudi Arabia, and we have the new U.S. guys. And that's quite a table full, isn't it?
It's the oligarchs plotting their takeover of our very divided world. And they see an opportunity in a moment, and they've put their playbook out there. The U.S. version is 2025, but there's a similar playbook in those edge of Eastern Europe countries that seem to be more willing to turn their back on democracy and welcome Putin with open arms. So it's a very dangerous time globally. We need to pay attention to it. I'm not quite sure what we can do about it at the moment, which is why, again, I think part of dealing with our anxiety about the crazies is what can I do locally to make life a little safer, a little calmer, a little warmer at the moment, because that's something I can get my hands on and do something about. And that might mean on occasion flooding or showing up at my congresswoman's office to support her back as she goes out there and tries to make sense of this mess. So the White House press office, there's a 28-year-old barely intern that's running it right now. I think that was another Fox host credential that somehow got into a top job. She's worse than Huckabee was in the first administration. I can't watch it.
She's the worst so far. I saw someone replaying that. Remember that Miss America or Miss Universe pageant when they had a gal and they asked her a question about something with political and national interest, and she proceeded to blah blah blah. If you're really an American, and I think it was, and they played it forever and ever. Somebody played it yesterday, basically saying, "Here she is, the person who is now the acting press secretary." But I was actually for a minute going, "Really? Was that her too?"
Wow. Amazing. Because
I couldn't believe
I haven't seen that clip yet. Yeah. Wow. It's part of the roadshow. It's part of the snake oil salesman. He's really good at squirrel stories that divert our attention from hard local organizing to make sure we don't lose this way the next time, assuming we have another election. We'll see. But I hope in, what is it now, 22 months, 21 months, that we actually have another election. And we'll see what blue states and red states feel about the changes that have been made to core governmental functions. What's happening already in the first month is dangerous for all of us.
Yes, it's dangerous for the kids in Africa whose AIDS program has shut down and who now are catching AIDS because of the USAID cutoff of their pennies that it took to keep those people safe. It also makes us know, that particular case, the USAID case, has opened, I think, some Americans' eyes, including my own, into the range of projects across the globe that we have been responsible for and carrying on with no big spotlight showing on them, but a huge effect in terms of health and, trying to eliminate hunger. It's an amazing thing that the U.S. has continued to do that without, any fanfare.
A good sign from Brazil in South America is Bolsonaro, who attempted a coup in the 22 elections there, has been indicted. And a bad thing that's going on is a lot of things in Africa that we need to pay more close attention to. One, though, is in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in the city of Goma. The M23 rebels who are being backed by Rwanda have made advances. This is not a good situation. So the ramifications for what we've been talking about with the new administration in D.C., the faux real government, they are having an impact on what goes on everywhere, as you both pointed out. I would like to share with everybody something that our neighbors up in Minnesota are doing, and I think around the country. There's a sign that consumers with liberal views are starting to, close their wallets to the likes of Target. There's a backlash against Target, the seventh largest retailer in the country. They have had a long history in recent years of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they have pulled back on that. And there is a backlash against it. They were a sponsor of the Twin Cities Pride up there in Twin Cities, and they are no longer being asked to be a sponsor. With that said, I want to say a couple of words about the Skokie water main break, mainly that people were out there working solid for 30 hours to contain it. So just a shout out to the workers. And Lynn, if you could tell us briefly what it was like boiling water at your house over the last few days.
I have to tell you the truth. I actually went to Rogers Park to my daughter's house and stayed there over the weekend. So I was able to take a shower but no, I want to give a shout out to the village and to everybody that was working so hard. I had a couple of friends that were really trapped in their homes that live at East Prairie and Emerson, where the water main break started. And I mean, they had water up to the middle of their doors of the car. They had seepage in their basements. They were walking out in buckets. I mean, it was a challenge, but they were. The one thing I thought was really interesting is that we really didn't get an overall notification. We still have a landline, and we finally got a phone call from the village saying that the boil water was over.
You're back in business. You could take a shower.
I can take a shower.
Yes. Let me ask Thom. Speaking of water, recently you sent an email out, or somebody did, that I saw a fellow walking his dog, and he saw that a fellow had fallen into the lake, and he was saved. I mean, someone threw him a life preserver, and then the police and the fire department came, and I think the guy's okay. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the battle to get those life preservers and your daily walks, or near daily, to the lake, where you take beautiful pictures of the sunrise and sunset?
Well, this is secondhand, but a colleague of my wife, who they work together on Third Act Communications. Third Act is a organization of seniors trying to deal with climate change. And she was out on her daily walk. She lives in Edgewater, so we assumed she was by Foster Beach, because she talked about seeing a guy on the pier slip off into the water. There were two bystanders apparently also on the pier. They grabbed one of the new red life rings and threw it out to him. And obviously someone called emergency services, and they showed up, and the guy got out, was taken out. We don't know his condition, but it did not end up in the news, so I assume there was not a serious injury or death from the incident. But we've seen families bring their kids out on these sandbergs we have in the lakefront right now, which is wonderful, because we'll have a huge beach next summer based on the current look of the beach. But do not walk on those sandbergs. You don't know where it's going to break off. And I got to tell you, getting out of the water off of one of those sandbergs, good luck. Start saying your prayers. So the fight to get those life rings happened after an unfortunate drowning. And a couple of neighbors, a mom and one of our better carpenter electricians handymen in the neighborhood, really launched a campaign to get local officials to get the park district to change their regs to put these life rings in. They actually installed on our Rogers Park lakefront temporary life rings that the park district took down a couple of times. But now we have these sturdy, obvious red rings, and this is a story about at least one life saved.
Well, Tom, you mentioned how it's hard to get out of these ice or sandbergs. In the old days, not recently, I used to go in the lake every month, and there are people who do it every day. I know now, but I remember it wasn't that deep when I jumped into this kind of water mass between these bergs. And to get out was not easy. I was lucky I had a rope tied around me, and Katie helped pull me out. So
Wow.
there. Now, you also, in our communications, you mentioned that you reminded us of how there was a tent encampment up on Clark Street, and a number of neighbors were starting to complain, and our alderman really took the initiative, and there's a new men's shelter. Share a little bit about that.
Promises kept, I guess, is what I put on this headline. While these things always take a little bit longer, the tent city in Toohey Park, which was removed over a year ago, has in part been replaced by decent, safe, warm housing for single men, 2 to a bedroom, on Clark Street, right at Rogers, and across the street from the Dominics. And it looks like a really nice facility. It is a totally different kind of setup than traditional warming centers or overnight shelters that you might be familiar with. And it's probably part of the wave of the future. And this will be a 24-hour facility with wraparound social services, warm meals up to 3 times a day. It's a really wonderful resource in the neighborhood dealing with a very specific issue that unhoused men in particular have, finding decent housing.
The things that Tom just talked about, the rings particularly, it was no fight at all. It was Maria Haddon's work that made it happen as a result of the community asking her, as Tom's mentioned, and bringing it to her. She was the reason that those rings went up. Now, I have lived in this city my entire life, and this city has always been along a lakefront. And we have always had lifeguards, but we never had rings to throw out. And our lifeguard system has some issues itself, but I won't go there now. But the fact that not just the story that you just told us, Tom, but there have been a number of saved lives in the last 2 years since she got those rings up on every single beach in Chicago. And she is also the reason that the men's shelter happened as quickly as it did. I mean, incredibly quickly. They found a building, they found a social service group right here in our neighborhood. They're the ones who found the building and helped put together what needed to be put together to make it happen so quickly. So, yeah, I know that what you, Tom, were talking about earlier was, okay, in a time when the stuff's hitting the fan in DC the way it is, at least we can, focus in on our neighborhoods, which a lot of people don't do as a normal practice. Here in Rogers Park, we have a long history of people actually caring about the neighborhood and doing things in it and having the interest and continued follow through to make certain things happen that make our lives that much better. Here in Rogers Park, we have the Artists of the Wall Festival.
You mentioned Artist on the Wall, and that reminded me that Tom had talked to me earlier about Facebook, and a lot of people are talking about getting off Facebook and Instagram, and I'd love to hear your opinion, because what Tom, I believe you said was you needed to promote certain things. I used to promote my events I was doing around my photography, as do you, and you've decided to stay with Facebook. I probably would be with them still, but I got kicked off somehow for being hacked, and I haven't figured out getting back on. What's your takes, all of you, on using Facebook in these times when the so-called leader of Facebook has been a Trump ally for a while now?
Well, number one, I'm a photographer, and for the moment, it's a good place for me to basically have a photo gallery. But the real reason I've decided to stick with it for the moment is that we have formed communities and helped organize efforts, including mutual self-help efforts, using that tool. We may need to find other tools going forward. But for the moment, particularly in Rogers Park, there are 2 or 3 Facebook groups that I find vital and go to or follow on a pretty regular basis to make sure I'm up on neighborhood news and upcoming events and whatnot. And I think that Protect RP is one example, though it is now using other vehicles. But that is an organization that's been able to use social media platforms to organize a local self-help response to the threat of ICE raids. And I'd actually love to have Katy's reflections on another Rogers Park community gathering this past weekend where upwards of 150 neighbors came out in support to rally for our immigrant neighbors. It included a nifty half-hour program and 12 organizations providing a variety of resources for people to learn about, including an interesting art project. We're now going to use the monarch as a symbol on our homes, businesses, whatever, that this is a safe place where people who feel threatened can show up and ring the doorbell. Katy, what was it like to be part of the security patrol outside Newfield School while we all gathered in support of our immigrants?
Well, you know, I like being the security person. There were many of us doing security in front of the school for that event. And that was because when number 47 and his minions decided that their big thing was going to be to deport everyone, we in Rogers Park had already dealt with this 8 years ago, and we developed something called Protect Rogers Park back then. And it did have the butterfly as the symbol, and we put that in our windows 8 years ago. This is Protect Rogers Park 2.0. And because of that, it's better. And because of that, when the deportation czar came with his little entourage that included Dr. Flip and Phil filming that idiot. What did we hear a couple days later in the news from Mr. Homan? Oh, those Chicagoans, they're well educated. They know their rights, and they're passing out something called Know Their Rights, and I say it's know how to not get arrested, and we're sitting here going, duh, yeah, that's the point. So I'm real proud of all of the organizing that Chicagoans do. We are an immigrant city. We always have been, and they better not mess with us. Yesterday, however, how many of you were aware of and forced to a window because of the huge noise that four big helicopters, the big black ones that usually accompany a president when he comes to visit town, 4 of them going way low. When I looked out my window, it was way low over the beach, and no one really can tell me. I've looked in both of our sites. Someone said they thought it was ICE related. Someone else said it was a training mission from the base up north. No one really knows, but it was really low. It was really loud and kind of scary. Those 4 helicopters going over yesterday. The Protect Rogers Park is just a really wonderful, and the meeting that we both attended, Tom, on Saturday was terrific. The spirits were high. I think the neighbors that need protection and outlook feel pretty good about their neighbors going out of their way to say, not here, ICE, not here. And that, somebody should start raising the amount of money that's costing.
Exactly.
Because that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
They don't get anybody because they've got the wrong names and they got their heads up, somewhere else. And we are paying for this baloney. And every time they fly in, they're using a big, expensive military plane. I mean, it's ridiculous. These guys are spending more money trying to shut down the government than the government would have spent in the same period of time, I bet.
Point well made.
In case people didn't listen to the show, I think 2 weeks back, we had Gabe Gonzalez and Torrance Gardner, who were two of the co-founders of Protect Rogers Park on. And if you go to youtube.com/Heartland Media, you'll be able to find that. That was very informative. And I think while there are efforts in the same direction around the country, this is pretty developed, and we can be proud of our friends and neighbors who've been involved. We're down to about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to share that Lynn and I, this past week, went down to a club called the Promontory in Hyde Park for a memorial, a music memorial for the late, great Gene Barge. And, we had Andy Davis, the film director, on the show last week. He knew Gene very well and used Gene in all his movies. The first time I met Gene was when we were working in the flick Stony Island together in '76. But Lynn and I had a really fun time riding all the way down to Hyde Park, all the way back, and listening to some great music. And I asked Lynn to come on the show again to share a little bit about not only that event, but what's going on in the music world. She's been out in California for the Grammys, and she's all getting ready for her Women in the Blues photo exhibit up in Cleveland. She's overloaded, but she's got a few minutes to tell us about music in the Windy City.
Because I always like to be surrounded by my compadres here. So thank you for having me on. And it was a great night with Daddy G. It was at the Promontory, and it really filled my heart. It was the Chicago Cats, which included Andy Davis's brother, Richie Davis. Yeah. On bass. We had some amazing solos. And it was great because there were a number of artists that were in the band that have been on the show over the years. And then I had to remind Michael and introduce some of the people, including Matthew Robinson, who did the solos of all of Daddy Gene Barge. And he was on, if you remember, he did a piece on Martin Luther King. He was quite extraordinary. Maggie Brown was there. And Jason Stern and Mo Betta Brown was there. And it was just a really, really, really great evening. They did a lot of the songs that Gene recorded at Chess Records, Fontella Bass, and with Willie Dixon and Wing Dang Doodle, 2:45. I mean, it was really a fabulous evening.
I'm so glad that you went with Michael. And
I'm glad too, even though he made me leave early.
That's what he does.
Before the jam, though, so we got a lot of really great music. But I do want to say one of the things that's just irking me right now. One of my favorite awards, and it's been award season, right, with the Grammys and Super Bowl and Saturday Night Live. But my favorite award show is the Kennedy Center Awards. And I am my head's exploding that we have this tyrant that he's going to go in and become the new chairman of the Kennedy Center. He's already fired 18 of the members, and he's never gone. He has never actually gone because
he wasn't invited.
Well, he actually was invited in the beginning, but the artists that were being awarded wouldn't go to the White House to have, a get together with him. So since then, he has not been to one of the awards show, and it's quite extraordinary. So anyway, I am getting ready to launch my Women of the Blues. I want to invite you over. Tom, you need to come to my living room. I've got 140 women in my living room right now.
Yeah, I've tried a couple times.
I know.
We'll make a date.
I've been buried alive in the blues. That's all.
I have photos for you.
Good. All right. And I have not been out to the lakefront recently because I've just been way too cold.
It shows how wise you are that you haven't been out on the lakefront recently.
No. But I want to know if the Labyrinth is still at Loyola Park.
No, it's gone.
Okay. That was one of my favorite things. But
there'll be another sculpture next week.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm
Except
sure.
it's frozen now.
So it's Black History Month, and one of the things that I wanted to encourage our listeners is to listen to some amazing music. Listen to Nina Simone. Tomorrow would be her heavenly birthday, a great jazz, blues, gospel artist, but most importantly, a civil rights activist who spoke her words through music.
While you're mentioning that, it's this weekend is the maybe 30th celebration of African American History Month at Loyola Park on Sunday at 12:30 on Greenleaf and Sheridan.
The DeSalvo Museum had a great program Sunday, and they have programs, every day going on there. And Matt B., who won the Grammy with his wife, Angela Benson, that we had on the Saturday before the Grammy Awards, performed. He's a South Shore High School graduate. And I'm going to send Hal and Michael some of that footage. It was extraordinary. And to see the two of them, these two young artists, win a Grammy was wonderful. They won for Best Global Record. It was great. One other really great thing I have to make note is Sheryl Crow sold her Tesla. I don't know if you saw that. And she gave all the proceeds to NPR.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, protect NPR. Okay, we're going to run out of time here. I think if anyone has a parting words they'd like to say.
Whose art is on the wall behind you, Lynn?
Nicholas Barron.
That's what I thought. I was
Another frequent
excited.
performing guest on Live from the Heart.
Yeah, we've had a lot of talk about people who were on in the past. We'll have to get them on again in the future.
Say they all asked while they were at the promontory. Everybody wants to come back on. So
I like that. I wanted to share one thing on my front is it's getting time when the weather gets better. I'll be on my front porch on Sundays, but I'm going to be at an event in Pullman. It's called Something for Everyone Arts and Crafts Market. It's at the Blockhouse Gallery, 11137. That's very far south, Langley, on Saturday, March 15th from noon till 4. And I'll be repeating that in the weeks to come. And I want to thank Thom Clark for coming on. I want to thank Lynn Orman for coming on. I want to thank Katy Hogan. I want to especially thank the birthday boy, Hal James, for being our engineer. I continue to encourage you all to do good in the world. Go ahead, Kate.
Because the world needs all the good that you do.
Oh, you're just getting ready. Okay, all you brothers and sisters, all power to the people. The world needs all the good that we do. We can do it. We're going to do it. Okay, over and out. See you next week.
Good luck, Hal.